Institute, Environment of Peace.
Dolwena, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the invitation. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge the chair of the board and the various board members, the governor of the Reserve Bank who's also here, and all the other invited guests, and of course all the real estate agents, licensed or otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk about a broad range of issues this morning, but essentially to highlight that real estate agents obviously play a very pivotal role in the economy because, economy generally, of course, is about trading, it's about real estate, it's about commerce, and all of those areas, in fact, get covered by real estate agents themselves. I remember reading a survey back in the 90s when I was in Australia, and they did a survey to find out what the public thought of which was the most distrusted professions in Australia at that point in time. And they actually had a grading, the most distrusted, the second most distrusted, the third most distrusted, and they went on the list. The top three most distrusted groups of people were car salesmen, real estate agents, and lawyers. So all of us are in good company. So I'm not just only singling out real estate agents. But I think the point being from that is that the industry needs to, and in working in hand with government, to ensure that the integrity and the credibility levels within the industry is maintained or indeed increased at this point in time in Fiji. And as government, obviously, we do get a lot of feedback in respect to what the public think about real estate agents. We have been for a number of years also monitoring as to the impact of the business conducted by real estate agents on real estate pricing. We have to look at, of course, for example, in countries like Australia, there's restriction on foreign ownership of land by foreigners for residential purposes, which we also introduced in Fiji, where in municipalities, foreigners cannot actually own real estate for residential purposes. But only, of course, for commercial, industrial, tourism purposes. So there's a number of factors that obviously are at play. So the first one that I'd like to highlight upon is the issue of integrity and credibility. And you have the board that governs the granting of licenses. We believe that the board can be a bit more robust in the way it monitors those people who have been actually granted licenses. Many professions, for example, and this is something that you can talk about and think about. It's not a question of imposition. It's a question of a profession seeking to ensure that its credibility is maintained with members of the public, that there is sustenance actually in the profession. That is critically important. How you are perceived is critically important. And how you actually are perceived not just by the public, but other organizations, for example, the Fiji Revenue and Customs Services, how you perceive, for example, by the Financial Intelligence Unit, how you perceive by accountants, lawyers, and various other institutions. That's critically important for you. And it is also critically important for those of you already in the business that you are able to protect your industry, your profession, with a particular level of, caliber of people that joins the profession. And if they actually join the profession, there must be some form of continuing professional standards that needs to be maintained. You see that, for example, with accountants and lawyers, where every year they have, you need to meet certain hours of learnings, and then you get what you call continuing legal education points or accounting points. Doctors actually have that too. And many other professions have adopted those types of continuing upskilling or continuing maintenance of standards within the profession to ensure that the organization and indeed the profession is viewed in a credible manner. So I think that's the first point. And my suggestion to you is that for you to be able to take advantage of today, and you'll be hearing from lots of other people in your discussions, to be able to talk about how you can actually improve your profession, create a lot more transparency, I can tell you numerous stories about how you can actually tell by certain transactions that there is no arm's length dealing going on. You see, for example, some properties advertised, hypothetically so, for $600,000, and it gets sold for $300,000, when you know the market value is actually $600,000. But where the balance of the $300,000 went and how it was paid is anyone's guess. Some of you have said to me privately, oh, I know this guy is doing it. Some of you have said that to me in this room, I can see you. But you don't want to put that down in writing. There are people, for example, who have, you can see there's also no arm's length dealing. Somebody is selling a property, say for $700,000. The real estate agent who's got the rights to sell the property is suddenly the person buying it is a very close relative of the real estate agent. And then a few months later the same property is being sold at double the price. It does happen, and many of you know it happens. Some of you may have actually participated in those kind of transactions. So I hope that today you will use the opportunity for some inward soul searching and inward professional searching as to how you want to maintain this profession. We've also had many people who've come to us and said to us, please get me a license because I've lost a job, and I know a friend of mine, he did 2 sales and he earned the entire sum of money that I earn in a year. So whether people are joining the profession for a quick buck is something that you need to also think about. And what type of standards do you maintain? There's of course a number of other changes that are happening in society that you also need to be cognizant of. You cannot simply operate in a vacuum. You obviously are aware, and the governor is going to speak to you later on, the overall economy. We've had the COVID, economy shut down, government revenue halved overnight. We lost $2 billion from the tourism sector. The nominal value of our GDP has gone down. We pumped in about $500 million into the economy, whether it's 2 rounds of 360, 2 rounds of 50 or $90, paying market vendors fees, etc. So all sort of, or paying people $225 a fortnight through the FNPF scheme. All of this obviously created some form of economic activity in a period where we probably would have come to a halt. And you've seen how economies that have not managed that situation well, in fact, today are suffering the consequences of not being able to manage the economy well. In that period also, we were given the opportunity to look at everything from a clean slate. Nobody in Fiji thought that we would ever have a situation where we say there won't be any stamp duties. Nobody ever thought that there would be a situation in Fiji where you would not require a business license. Today you don't need to pay for a business license. Nobody pays for a business license to start a business. Unless, of course, you're going to sell food and you need to get a clearance from, Ministry of Health or various OHS issues. So it gave us an opportunity to look at things afresh, completely afresh. And in fact, many people would not resist that because the situation was such. Over 2,000 items, for example, have become duty-free. So all of these things have happened, and the question you need to ask yourself is, how are you placing yourself as a profession within this new paradigm that's actually been created? The Macroeconomic Committee, headed by the Governor and the Bureau of Statistics and PS Economy and various other independent officers, have predicted that the economic growth rate will be about 11%. IMF is saying somewhere about 10.7% or so. Westpac is saying, I think it's about 12%. ANZ is a lot more boisterous, and they're saying that it's going to be 23%. I bloody hope ANZ is right. But even if we were to hit, halfway mark, the fact of the matter is that you need to ask yourself how you're positioning yourself. Where are your customers? Where are your clients? And are you able to, reconfigure yourself, recalibrate yourself? I'll give you an example. There's as you know, we've got open bases for taxis now. So taxis can park anywhere, wherever there is a base. Previously, you had set bases, you paid fees, and that's the only place you could park. So those people who had taxi bases near the market would have a windfall. But if they took a customer away, that base would be empty, nobody else could come and park, even though there was a need. If they did come and park there or picked a passenger, the police would book them, the LTA would book them. There's a public demand. There's all this tension that is created as a result of that. Constant struggle, constant fights about it. So now we've got an open base system. You can park anywhere, but we've created bases in the suburbs, etc. People can use those as bases too. So somebody, we were in Lautoka about a week and a half ago, and they said, all the taxi drivers are now just coming to Lautoka market and we're fighting there now. But nobody is looking at the long term. Those people now with the open base license, they're saying this is great. Those who did not have, those who had closed bases, they're saying this is terrible. And I talked to them about how have you now sort of calibrated yourself in this new context. There's about 10 or 15 of you are sort of coming and making representations. Have 10, 15 of you got together and said, let's form a cooperative. Let's have a common phone number. Let's be able to say that, I'll put myself on the GPS. So when a parent says to a taxi driver that please pick up my daughter or my son from school, they know exactly where the taxi is, because that's what Uber does. Now, we have resisted Uber from coming into Fiji. We would have killed the taxi industry overnight. But the taxi industry itself can actually develop and adopt the technology. It's not very expensive. Last year, I met somebody who works for an international agency and said he came to Suva, he got in a taxi somewhere, downtown Suva, and the taxi driver asked him, he said, would you like the windows up? Do you want the air conditioning on? So that was very impressive, because nobody's ever asked him that. And then he asked him, he said, oh, do you want a bottle of water? Then at the end of it all, he gave him his card. And he said, I use a taxi about 4 or 5 times in a day. I've been here for the past 2 weeks and I use him every single day. So it's again knowing what your customer needs, requires. It's knowing what the situation is in the 21st century. There's adoption of technology. How many of you actually have adopted technology in your day-to-day businesses? How many of your customers know what you're doing on Facebook or social media? Those are the kind of things you need to think about. And those are the kind of things you need to appeal to. We have obviously been concerned about the escalating real estate price. I'm talking about pre-COVID. And this is why we introduced the laws about foreigners not being able to buy real estate within municipalities. I know there's been some issues about those who buy outside municipalities and how we're monitoring that. That's another issue. But again, I think that's the issue about commissions then came into it. And it's been gazetted yesterday that the 2% commission is now applicable for any property that's sold for $500,000 or less. So it's 2%. The lady there is shaking her head. But the fact of the matter
Recording in progress.
Oh, wow. She's got the recording going on now. But the point is that there is a huge public outcry that people were selling properties at prices or getting commissions that were out of whack. It was pushing up real estate prices. So I think it is a first point, the threshold is now $500,000. Anything below that is 2%. Of course, it does not mean, if you read the regulation properly, it does not mean people cannot pay for disbursements up front. They can. But the commission obviously is 2%. Anything above that is, a relationship that you develop and the pricing that you come up to with your clients. Now, but please take this as an opportunity to see how well you can do with that, because we are very keen to ensure that it does work. If it doesn't work, and we're saying that people are still being fleeced, then we may need to look at other regulations. We have done a comparison in other countries. If you look at Australia, you look at New Zealand, and various other countries, the Ministry of Commerce and Trade have looked at that. The rates that were being charged in Fiji were quite more, substantially more in most cases. So that's the first step. And please be mindful that we want your input in respect of how you're going to develop your profession further. I mean, we're having a discussion with the board earlier on this morning about developing courses. In time to come, people who want to become real estate agents, there should be some minimum type of qualification, minimum type of understanding about conveyancing, etc. There are a lot of people who are real estate agents don't understand the fundamentals of conveyancing. They don't know the difference between a mortgagor and a mortgagee. Those are the types of things, obviously, that we need people who are working in the real estate industry to know. The other issue that I also wanted to highlight, which you can think about also, we are very concerned, as we've stated a number of times, that about the low rate of home ownership in Fiji. The rate of home ownership in Fiji is very low. The rate of insurance on residential properties is in fact even lower because of the very onerous provisions imposed by insurance companies for example, getting cyclone cover. This is why when there's a cyclone, government has to fork out really, hundreds of millions of dollars helping people rebuild their homes. So we are concerned about the long-term sustainability. We've launched a couple of parametric insurance products, and we're looking at how we can actually ensure that people first of all start owning homes, and secondly, when they do build homes, there's a particular level of resilience. So we've, in fact, what we have done is we've identified a number of properties, working with IFC to do some massive scale development on those properties. There's about six or seven sites, mainly in the Suva, Nosori area, and there's a couple in the west. The other issue is that most of you, when you think about selling a home, you think about a block of land with a house in the middle of the block of land. You're not thinking about strata title. Only those of you who work on the top end may be looking at strata titling and selling strata titles at Redison or Hilton and what have you. But nobody's thinking, and nor have we heard from any real estate agent, any input, what their views are, for example, regarding strata titling, selling to ordinary Fijians. 3 days ago, I was down at the Aviation Academy. We've got another 50 or 60 young Fijians who are now going to become flight attendants. Now, we should be inculcating in their minds that one of the first things they should do is start to buy a house or an apartment that they own for 99 years strata titling. Now, that culture is not there of owning a home. I'm sure many of you would know that a lot of people who do buy homes that tend to be over the age of 30. We don't actually have people, younger people, single young Fijians, male or female, buying their first property. I can tell you numerous stories, and I've seen footage, the governor has seen it too. There are so many people, because they don't actually have an asset base, they require funds, and because they don't have an asset base, they aren't able to go to the mainstream financial institutions and borrow money, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So what do? They go to money lenders. And what do the money lenders do? The money lenders take their ATM card as security. So at 4 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. on a Thursday, whenever the money hits the accounts, you see the footage, you have people walking out of the cars in their hoodies and what have you, with this many ATM cards and PIN numbers, and withdrawing money, standing there for about an hour, taking out money from people's various bank accounts. It's a fact. Now for us, the solution for that is to stop those people from going to money lenders, is for them to get an asset base. The best way to do that is actually for them to own property. The trick though is, there's no point, for example, saying, let's build this block of strata apartments and let's put all the low-income people there. And I hope you are really digesting this, because it's critically important to the development of property industry in Fiji. So we used to what we call in Fiji low-cost housing. So you have Mata Voli Voli here in Nadi, you have Tawakumbu, you have Rewai, you have Nambua. So those areas then become forever condemned to be ghettos of low-income people. So there's no opportunity for what we call socio-economic progression. Because if I buy an apartment today, in 3 years' time, assuming that I'm single and I now I've got a promotion, I want to buy a 2-bedroom apartment, or I'm now married and got kids and I want to buy a 3-bedroom apartment, or sell the apartment and actually buy a block of land with a home on it, I need to be able to sell that property at a price higher than what I bought it for. But if it's going to be an area or a block of apartments that have been condemned to be a ghetto, I won't be able to get out of it. That's why so many people have been living there for decades. Now you may think that this is Social issue, why should we be concerned about it? You should be concerned about it, because you are in the business of dealing with houses. And for a lot of people, houses not houses, they're actually homes. And it builds their future. So we'd like to hear your contribution on that. I don't know, some of you may be wealthy enough to do strata titles yourself. There's a number of incentives in place. If a certain percentage up to the level 3 of the apartments are below a particular price level, you get a 15% tax deduction on those properties. There's a number of incentives that have been put in place. So for us, that's a strategic goal, and we are going to work upon that. We are working with IFC, develop those sites. And you, of course, will be participating there. You'll be selling, and you'll be selling strata titles to ordinary Fijians and buying from them too. So that's something you need to be aware of. The other critical issue is announced in the revised budget, and here Nemia Dawai is here, who is the head of Treasury, also on the TLTB board, and I'm sure he's going to talk to you about that too. There has been a disconnectivity previously between Itauke land development and overall development that we have seen. And there's been a lot of disputes regarding that. So TLTB has gone off, done its own valuation, done its own sort of demarcation of boundaries. There's been a lot of disputes. So as announced in the budget through the chair of TLTB, which is the Honourable Prime Minister, said TLTB now will work very closely with Town and Country Planning to make sure you get the demarcations, the boundaries marked up properly, the first round, for the agreement of lease, and then immediately thereafter there should not be, when the lease is actually issued, there should not be any changes in the boundaries. I don't know how many of you actually come across this, but it's a big problem. TLTB now will be using professional valuers, going outsourcing it, so there's a lot more work for the private sector. How many of you actually, can recalibrate yourself and maybe work with TLTB? There's a lot of opportunities. How many of you know valuers? How many of you know people who are surveyors who currently don't do work for them, but they actually can get work from them now? So those things are critically important for you to also understand. And I hope, and this is what we continuously say, is that whenever you have such a profession that has got so many interlinkages with the other professions, that we hope that you actually work together. So you should know the surveyors, you should know the valuers, etc. So you can get much better synergy between all the different groupings. The other point that I also wanted to make was about building codes. Again, you may think this outside your remit, but actually it's very important. I mean, I see an engineer there who's also a real estate agent. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that we need to also look at how we can improve the building codes and building standards in Fiji, how we can make it a lot more greener. I don't know how many of you have actually ever made any contribution in that respect. I've never seen a real estate agent make budgetary submissions on that. Because again, this is your industry. And this is why I get a bit concerned, because I think currently the way the profession works, it's very much detached from everything, all other aspects within the wider home construction, home industry itself. It's all about just buying and selling. It's not about sustainability, looking at how we can improve the quality of the lives of people in Fiji, but also have a robust, real estate business in Fiji too. So, what percentage of homes, for example, should have natural lighting coming through? Should, for example, water tanks be made compulsory, etc., etc. Those are many things that we have to consider, and it would be good to get your input into it. I think the other point that I lastly would like to make is that, again, just sort of getting back to the issue of making more land available for subdivisions. As we said, there's no tax on any profits from subdivision. We also have linked in now, government, as you know, gives a $30,000 grant to anybody that's building their first home and earns less than $50,000 a year. We actually give a $30,000 grant as long as they go through a financial institution. If you're buying your first home, which some of you would be concerned about, we pay $15,000 or $20,000 if you're buying your first home and you earn less than $50,000 a year. How many of you actually know that about that package? How many of you actually are repackaging yourself to package that particular product? If you earn more than $50,000 and less than $100,000, If you're building your first home, it's $15,000. If you're buying your first home, it's $5,000. I mean, how many of you are actually taking advantage of that? When it makes you a lot more marketable. It makes you offer a good product. If you're able to go to your client and say, look, we can take you through this journey. We can actually help you with this. And by word of mouth, you'll actually, get a lot of traction on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I wanted to sort of highlight those issues and provide food for thought, because there are many speakers, of course, after me who will specifically be talking about the areas of interest that they have. But I wanted to just put these ideas on the floor so you can look at the big picture and look at how you can actually remodel yourself to be able to fit into this economy moving forward. And obviously the dynamics of the economy has changed quite significantly, and it will continue to change. There's a particular level of global instability with things like war in Russia and Ukraine, with the post-pandemic inflationary impact, for example, of freight and various other supply chain issues. And we've seen the escalation of fuel prices. We of course, just one of the good things is, of course, that some of the gas prices may soon come down. We're hoping that that'll happen because of what's happening in the market as far as the gas prices are concerned. We're also being told by shipping companies that, for example, freight costs should stabilize around about September, October. So a lot of it will depend on whether China actually opens up. China has been the largest manufacturer of all goods in the world. And when you've got China on lockdown, you can imagine how many zillion containers are actually locked up in China. So there's actually a shortage of containers. Container used to cost $5,500 from Auckland to Fiji. Before the pandemic, now cost about $16,500. So those costs will of course be passed on to the consumers. It will affect your businesses also. So I think overall, today when you are getting together, please think about those issues. Please think about the fact that the black economy is not something that's sustainable. And we will do all to stop the black economy. There was a World Bank study done in 2006. The report came out that said 1/3 of the Fijian economy was in the black. It's obviously not a good place to be in. There has not been a recent study done. Well, hopefully we'll do one very soon to see what percentage of it has come down, because we can assure you that it has come down, but we don't want any percentage of the economy to be in the black. And that's critically important. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for the invitation. I'd like to thank the board, and I'd like to wish the board all the best and urge the board to, of course, continue to increase the standards of this particular profession.
Except